start our program this evening. Thank you all for taking the time to be a part of our Financing Your Future Strategies for Navigating Your Student Loan Program. My name is Alex Brown, and I serve the fraternity as our Director of Education and Leadership Programs. And we're very excited that you all have joined us this evening as we talk a little bit about navigating your finances and planning ahead for success in navigating your student loans. And so I'm very pleased to be able to welcome our guest presenter this evening. Again, my name is Alex Brown, Director of Education and Leadership Programs, but I'm thrilled to be able to be joined by an alumnus of ours, Kevin Smith, who's going to be sharing his personal story in navigating his student loan repayment. So Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you for a quick introduction.
All right. Hi, everyone. Sorry that I'm a name on a black background for now. My laptop worked and then it didn't work and then it updated and now the battery says it's experiencing permanent failure, but I think we'll be good in a couple of minutes. I'm just gonna have to switch over, so bear with me. But yeah, like Alex said, I graduated in 2016 from Case Western. Those of you who aren't familiar, it's not a cheap institution to say the least, and I have had the pleasure and at sometimes displeasure of kind of figuring out my own pathway through my student loan debt. And I think I've come up with some strategies that have worked for me that hopefully I can share today that will work for some of you, or at least will give you some ideas for what to expect down the line. I think the information that Alex has put together is great, and I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit from all of you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kevin. A few housekeeping notes as we begin. Would again please encourage you to turn your cameras on for tonight's program. I also have dropped a link in the chat, so please feel free to record your attendance for tonight's program. This will help us with tracking our attendance, follow through, follow up. And I know a few groups are using this program as part of some recognition efforts. So would encourage you to make sure that you get your attendance recorded so you get that recognition for being here. And again, so as we kind of kick things off, tonight is really going to be talking about ways to successfully manage your student loans. And we're going to be talking about a variety of different things, discussing the types of loans, options for repayments, and tips for navigating the process for yourselves, because everybody on tonight's program has a different experience with their loans, has different needs, and will be responding and paying based on their capabilities and what careers and things lie ahead for you. So as we begin tonight, we want to talk a little bit about understanding the current state of student loan debt and the outlook that many students are facing. So again, I'd be amazed for any of our students to not be aware of the fact that the skyrocketing cost of higher education is creating an expanding burden of student loan debt. So right now there's an estimated $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. Now, again, trillion with a T. And I got to be honest, that those are numbers that are so high that it's almost difficult and complex to comprehend, right? When you're talking about over $1 trillion of debt. And over the last 10 years, that student debt load just in the US has grown by over 100%. And so again, that number is likely continuing to climb as the costs of education continue to rise and more students are attending colleges looking to stay competitive in the job market. And so that, I think, is a very real element that we all need to keep in mind is this expanding debt is likely something that not only are you going to be continuing to deal with, but the brothers that come after you are also going to be navigating for themselves. Now, as part of what complicates this even further is the current pandemic. The pandemic has impacted our lives in countless ways, and student loan debts and repayments is no different. The pandemic has placed a renewed focus on the student loan crisis. You've likely seen articles or pieces in the news about the potential of student loan forgiveness. And while that talk is out there, this isn't something that you should count on, right? I think for our members who are in the U.S., political discourse is not always a civil conversation, right? And the odds of putting all your money in the fact that, well, if I graduate, my student loans are going to be forgiven is not a safe bet. And so it's really important to understand that while there is some relief that's been connected to student loans, like repayments being on hold for the time being, at some point those are going to start up again. So if we have any young alumni that are on the call tonight, you may be experiencing that where some of your loans, you haven't had to repay them right now. That's going to be changing. And for those of you that are going to be graduating in a few weeks or in the year to come, that is also, again, something you are not going to be able to count on. And it's important to remember that before the pandemic, when the economy was much stronger, there were still over 11% of loans that were delinquent. And that figure might be a little shocking to some of you. And what this doesn't necessarily translate is the negative impact that being delinquent can have on you financially. So, again, by being proactive and planning ahead, you can help avoid delinquency on your loans and making sure that you keep your financial future bright. So now I'm going to turn things over to Kevin to talk a little bit more about um, some ways to be prepared for success when navigating this process.
Great, thanks. It's not looking great on the camera front, so I apologize there. I think there's a picture of me attached to one of the two me's in the chat right now, so if that makes things easier, um, my sincere apologies there. Anyway, but yes, talking about preparation and know like what you need to know about debt, and this may vary person to person. As Alex said, there's like differences across, based on where you live and things like that. The first thing on here is the debt that you end up with is actually the result of more than just the debt that you like sign up for in a way. Um, so there's a few different kinds of loans, and we're going to get more into that later. But for instance, in my own experience, I have some unsubsidized loans. I have some subsidized loans. These are probably terms you've heard. They're kind of buzzwordy when it comes to loans in general. I have private loans, things like that. And one of the things to keep in mind is interest. For your subsidized loans, you should be good, but unsubsidized loans are going to accrue interest while you're in school. You might not know that. I did not know that. And when I got that message that was like, by the way, you owe a few thousand more than you thought, I was like, what? So that's one of the things to keep in mind. What you signed up for and the type of loan you signed up for, you should double check and make sure, because there's a chance you could be accruing interest. And once your grace period ends, that will all flip into the principal balance. And then you'll be owing interest on top of the interest that had accrued. So anything you can do to pay that down now will be beneficial for sure. Obviously, you don't need to. That's what it's designed to not require those payments while you're in school, because not all of us can get jobs while we're in school or anything like that. But one of the things to keep in mind. And then I think Alex touched on the long term impact. Um, we'll talk on it, and it's on here as well. The idea of credit. I don't know how many of you are in tune with your credit score, or have a credit card, or have a line of credit in general, but your loans are going to be a lot more than just paying for college. There's going to be goods and bads. Like I said, the pleasure and the displeasure of loan repayment. Your credit, if you miss a payment, it's going to hurt you pretty bad. And it's tough to recover from that sort of thing. If you make consistent payments, you're going to have a really good credit score by the time you're in your late 20s. If you're like me and have been paying debt for the entirety of your life since you've left college, your credit score is going to be pretty above average for your age bracket. The other thing to keep in mind is not all loans repay in the same amount. I have some loans that repay a 15-year plan. I have some that repay on a 10-year plan. So you really need to check what your loan servicer is kind of providing you for a repayment option, and you can also customize those as needed. I think that's one of the things that if Alex doesn't mention, I'll certainly mention later, kind of when I'm giving my piece. But making informed decisions now, making smart decisions now will pay off for you in the future, financially and in general. As mentioned, if you can afford to pay for your loan interest now, I always recommend that. It'll save you a lot down the line. If you can't, that's okay too. Like I said, the safety net is built in. Um, or if you have a long-term goal, if you want to buy a car, or if you have a car and are paying the car, or you have, family obligations or significant other obligations, things like that. You want to keep those in mind when you are making financial decisions, because that's going to be something that, if you make a giant budget for yourself, those kinds of things are going to show up in there, and you need to factor that in when you're, um, figuring out how much you can afford to pay back. So, um, and as I mentioned, the significant impact of credit and your student loans, missing payments is very bad. Making payments is very good. If you're able to manage those now and set up a sustainable plan, honestly, you can almost weirdly swing it back around if you improve your credit score enough to get a better loan in the future if you need that, if you go back to school, something like that, or if you're financing a car, or if you're getting an apartment, all the things that the credit score applies to. Just by paying your debt, you will be setting yourself up substantially for the future. It'll be a lot easier. It'll open a lot more doors, both financially and otherwise, for you, just by making a payment on time. And I'm going to go ahead and I can throw it back to Alex here to talk a little bit about the fun part where we get to talk about what we owe.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Kevin. We're gonna launch a real quick poll for everybody, and so you should be seeing that here come up for you. Uh, Again, just an estimate, but want to ask our participants here: how much loan do you anticipate graduating with? Falling in that $1,000 or less, between 1 and 10,000, 10,000 to 25, 25 to 50, 50,000 or above, or I don't have a clue. So we're going to give it just a few more moments. Please, I would encourage you to submit your answer here. Again, less than 1,000, uh, 1 to 10, 10 to 25, 25 to 50, above 50, or I don't have a clue. All right, seeing if several more votes coming in. Give it another 5 seconds here, so cast your vote. All right. So it looks like we've got a number of folks that are they anticipate graduating with less than 1,000. That's fantastic. Several with between 10 and 25, a few more 25 to 50, several with 50 or above, and a couple of you don't have any idea. And that's part of what we want to talk about tonight, right? So again, everyone is coming into their college experience in different ways, different backgrounds, different experiences, and your ability to pay for college is manifesting in a variety of different ways. And so, an important part of this process is understanding what you owe. I'll be the first to admit, when I was an undergraduate student, if you would have asked me what I was graduating with, I would have been in that I don't have a clue category. It wasn't something that was on my radar. I just knew I took out my loan so that I could attend, and okay, I'll pay them off afterwards, but that wasn't my concern at the time. But it is really helpful as you start to plan for your future to understand what is the debt that you'll be leaving with. And so understanding that process is important because right now the average student loan debt is over $32,000. And that is a significant amount of money, especially when you factor in the fact that that is the principal, right? So if I'm graduating with over $32,000 in debt, that doesn't mean, oh, I'll pay $32,000 off and I'll be good. That means I'm going to be paying $32,000 with interest. And that is a whole different category of responsibility. It's also important to realize that right now, again, the average loan repayment was almost $400. So when you start to think about what is my monthly expense going to look like, how am I going to be paying my bills each and every month? Are you factoring in that you may be paying 400, close to $400? Again, some less, some more. But by understanding what the monthly expense is going to be, it allows you to better understand what type of salary do you need. So as you start that job search and you're in those negotiations with future employers, it'll help you understand how do you need to structure your finances to be fiscally solvent from month to month. The other part of understanding the loan process is what type of loan do you have? So again, I'm going to launch one more quick poll, and we'd love for you to share. And this one you should be able to select more than one, but go ahead and share what type of loan do you currently have. So again, direct unsubsidized, plus private student loans, parents, or I'm not sure. So go ahead and make those submissions. Seeing a number come in, that's great. Again, looking for what type of loans do you currently have? We're going to give it another 10 seconds here. So please, if you haven't done so, cast your vote. All right. So it looks like some recognition for a direct unsubsidized, some private student loans out there, some parent loans, and a significant chunk with I don't know. Again, I would have been in the same boat. If you were to ask me what do I owe, I likely wouldn't have had a clue, or what type of loan would I be able to pay back. And so it's important to think about and understand, just as it's important to know that final number of what am I graduating with and what am I going to be repaying. It's also important to start to think about what type of student loans you have, or is it more than one, right? Because you may be in a situation where you have several loans that are different types. And the reason that's important is because they all carry with them different responsibilities, different requirements, interest rates, all those sorts of things. So we're going to talk just real briefly about some of the common ones. So for those that have direct subsidized loans, these are loans that were based really on your financial need, right? Then there are direct unsubsidized loans, which they're not just about financial need, they're really credit based. So you won't need a co-signer. This is something that your institution, your college or university will ultimately determine how much you can borrow based on what is the cost to attend that institution, and any other financial aid you're receiving. Your financial aid package might have included scholarships, work study, those sorts of things. A part of that may have also included unsubsidized loans. Direct plus loans are, again, credit based, and they're unsubsidized federal loans. So again, the direct subsidized and direct unsubsidized and the plus loans are all federal loans. So the plus loans are also known as they're also for parents, right? So a parent may be taking out a parent plus loan. These are also really common for graduate or professional students. So if you haven't had them now and you're looking at law school, med school, and MBA, this might be something that you have in the future as well. The private student loans are not federally based. These are loans taken out directly by you, the student. These are often co-signed by a parent or another credit-worthy individual. They're going to come from a bank or another private financial institution and not the federal government. And again, parent loans. These are ways that a lot of students access money for college. This is a situation where, again, you might be getting financial support directly from your parents, but there's also specific parent loans where parents are the ones that are taking, or other creditworthy folks are taking out a loan on behalf of you to help pay back and pay for your college education. So it's important to understand what loans are offered in your financial aid package. So again, some of you may be getting ready for graduation. Others, you might have several years left in college. So as you start to get that financial aid package, it's important to really understand what are you signing up for and what are those responsibilities and the types of loans that you're being offered from the institution. So now we're going to talk a little bit about really kind of the crux of things, right? The repayment process. And just like there are a variety of types of loans that are available to you as students and college students, there's also a lot of different ways in which those loans are repaid, right? Taking out the loans is the easy part. Navigating the repayment process can be a much more daunting process. So again, there's a number of different approaches that are available to you that you can work out directly with your loan provider. So a couple, we'll run through some of the common ones here for you to keep in mind. The standard loan repayment process is going to be something that is a fixed monthly amount that pays off your student loans in usually about a 10-year period, right? So it's going to take your total amount that you owe in loans, calculate your interest payments, and it's going to be divided across a 10-year repayment plan. Your monthly cost for that is going to be fixed month in, month out until that loan's repaid in that 10-year period. There's also a graduated process, right? And so the graduated process starts off with lower monthly payments that begin to increase or balloon usually about every 2 years. So you'll start off paying your loan back at a lower rate, but as you get closer to that end of that 10-year period, your monthly payments are going to continue to increase. Now, again, this might be useful for you as you're starting off your career. You might not be making as much money and you think, hey, I know, or I'm anticipating within the next 5 to 10 years, I'll be making significantly more. Great. This is one way that I can manage my debt and still be paid off in roughly 10 years. There's also the opportunity for income-based repayment options. Now, this is going to be based on your discretionary income and what you've got. Your loan provider will work to figure that out, and they'll be recalculated yearly based on your income and family size. Some of the income-based pieces may also include forgiveness. So after the end of an extended period of time, let's say 20 or 25 years, that loan repayment, depending on your provider, if you continually make your payments on time, may include some level of loan forgiveness. Again, that would all be dependent on your financial provider, and that's something you need to be able to work with and talk with them to understand. There's also the extended loan option, and this is something where you're going to be paying lower monthly rates, but over an extended period of time, so a longer life of your loan. So instead of that typical 10-year time frame, you might be extending out to a 25 or 30-year payment, right? And so again, that might be a scenario where you're paying a lower monthly cost, and that might work with your financial need, but it's also a reminder that the amount of interest that you'll be paying on that loan is significantly longer than the 10-year period. And finally, another path that people take is looking at loan consolidation. So again, each individual situation is different, but for many students, including myself, I had more than one student loan from more than one provider. And so for some individuals, they look at loan consolidation, where this is an opportunity to give you refinance your loans, access things at a lower rate, and pay things off in one payment instead of several across multiple providers. So all of these options are really important that you figure out what is your situation, right? Everyone on this call is going to have a different career, a different life situation. You're going to be living in different parts of the world. So that cost of living is going to be different. So all of those things need to be figured into your plans for repayment, and you can work directly with your loan provider to figure out what situation and what process works best for you. So again, as we move on throughout tonight, feel free if you want to throw some questions in the chat. We're also going to be taking time for questions at the end of this evening's program, but just want to throw it out there. Feel free to ask questions as we go. But I'm going to turn things back over to Kevin. So we've spent some time talking about kind of the basics of student loan repayment and what does this process look like. And I know, again, speaking from personal experience, it was really an overwhelming piece at times. And figuring out how am I going to tackle this. And so we're very excited to be able to welcome an alumnus, Kevin Smith, to talk about his personal story in navigating student loan repayment, to share his experiences, his insights, and his wisdom with all of you, and giving you some real life perspective on how to make this happen. So Kevin, I'm going to turn things over to you.
All right. Hello again. As you see, the name is Kevin, and as I said earlier, graduated from Case in 2016, which was a very expensive endeavor. For this presentation, I recently went back and calculated all of my debt, which, just so you all know, in 10 years from now, don't do that. It makes you sad. So I ended up leaving Case with a shade over $60,000 of debt. So the people who had the 50 plus, you're my people. I appreciate you, and I just want you to know that while this seems daunting, it's definitely doable. It seems like you always hear about how it's crippling debt and things like that, and to an extent it can be, but there are ways to make it work. I've been completely fine, completely secure the whole time, which obviously some of that comes down to luck, in kind of household circumstance. I was very fortunate in that regard, but the path kind of leading here has been a wild one. So I graduated in 2016, and actually right out of college, I was an LC for Delta Chi. So I traveled, and advised chapters for a year, which turned out to be a great plan for me. It just kind of fit. I was young, I had time, and the best part about the job was it was very low personal expense. So I was able to save a lot of money, and that's going to be something that you should definitely focus on, is saving anything out of a paycheck that you can. That's kind of just finance in general. Which reminds me, I'm not a financial expert, so remember this is just my personal testimony. It worked for me. It might not work for you, but uh, just wanted to let you all know. Take what I say with a grain of salt if needed. As I mentioned earlier, 10 to 15 years on my loans. So in total, I have my big Stafford loan, which is a mixture of subsidized and unsubsidized loans, and then I have the Perkins loan, and I have some private loans. So in total, I have, I want to say it's like 4 active loans right now. I technically the Stafford loan is like 11 smaller loans lumped into one, but I make 4 payments. With my debt, I make about like an $800 a month payment, which is a lot. Some of that is because I'm insane and like to pay aggressively, which I'll talk more about in a minute. But also, it just kind of was the luck or unluck of the draw with my loans. The size of the principal just kind of yielded a bigger month to month payment. So that'll be a big part of planning for the future. But happy to say that after 4.5 years, so I would have reached, I think there's like a 6 month, I had a 6 month grace period on the loans. I was actually able to pay off one of my loans completely before it started after that 6 month grace period, just from saving money from my job. I saved up literally $6,000 and spent 6,000. It's the most expensive thing I've ever bought. Was a one student loan payment, and it was tough to do because it's a lot of money to give away, or not, I guess not to give away, but to lose. But that was a big chunk. It was 10% of my debt, or a little bit less than that. So that helped immensely. But since then, which I think it was like November of 2016, I think that math checks out. Since then, I've actually paid off over half of my debt. I actually just recently cracked the $30,000 mark. So woohoo! Celebrate that, I guess. Little victories in life. But I did just recently pay off one of my private loans as well, which is what kind of got me over that hump. But I am actually projected to pay off everything in 3 years, which will end up being about 7 years of repayment. So, like 3 to 8 years early, depending on the loan, which I've been told is very impressive. So that's nice. And I can share a little bit about that process and how I know I'm projected to pay that much off, because it's not, as Alex said, it's not like, oh, I took out this much debt and I'm going to just pay this, because interest and things happen. Interest, you kind of get it added on, so your minimum payments don't necessarily all go towards the principal. They go towards the interest balance and then the principal. And um, so it's a little more complicated than that. Some loan servicing websites, in fact, most of them, if not all, offer like a look at payoff or request payoff amount. So you could play with that and put in like a date. Like if you had a date you needed it paid off by for some reason, it would tell you like what it would cost to pay it off by that time. So that's a nice tool that's included. But you can go ahead and jump to the next slide, Alex. I have a couple of bullet points of just um, basic suggestions for you. I mentioned aggressive payments earlier. Let me explain a little bit about where I was coming from. So I finished my time as an LC kind of on a down note. My mom had actually passed away, And so I had to move back home. I had planned to do the LC job for another year, and I had all these great plans for paying off my debt, and I had a great calendar planned for it. And then, my mom unfortunately passed. Although I will say it took some of my debt away, which was a small upside of that horrible situation. But it was fortunate for me at that time that happened. I guess it was about the only good thing that came out of it. But um, I was suddenly thrust into adulthood against my will. And well, I guess I did graduate college, so I was already an adult, but I was really put into adulthood fast. And unfortunately, my dad actually has Parkinson's, and so I had to move back home to help my brother take care of my dad. So I was really put in a tough spot. I had been living the LC life and then suddenly had to move back home. Fortunately, my dad never charged me rent or anything like that. And actually, I'm going to probably jump around on this slide. I just kind of put things down for things I had thought. But if you look at the last bullet, taking advantage of the freebies, freebies are awesome. And I'm sure as college students, you probably love going to events and getting free food and things like that. So you've probably internalized that mentality already. But that honestly goes quadruple into adulthood, and I'm sure Alex can can attest to that. Free things are awesome. Um, if you find yourself with the ability to live at home, there's nothing lame about that. Love your parents, or love whoever it is that is taking care of you. Spend some time with them. And if they're not charging you rent and you're contributing in a way that is mutually beneficial, save that money. I lived at home after college for about 2.5, 3 years before my girlfriend and I moved in together. And we have our own place now, but only apartment living. We're not getting crazy. I still have a lot of debt, but um, living at home helped a lot, especially in that buffer period between jobs. I didn't have income. How was I going to pay my loans? How am I going to pay any of my debt? I don't have money coming in at that point. Um, and I was, you know, it was very much a deer in headlights moment. You kind of stare at this huge number and go, wow, like this is my next decade of my life or next 15 years of my life. Or if you refinance, it could be 20, 30 years of your life. And in that moment, I made a quick decision. This kind of goes to the understanding your means point. Maybe I'm just going to go backwards. I don't know. We'll see how I flow through the slide. But there's two sides to understanding your means. One, um, I knew that I had to live pretty below my means for a while. And if you're not familiar with that, what I mean by that is like the amount of money I had to treat it like I had less. I had to live my life and pinch some pennies for a little while because I didn't really have the funds to go do that fun thing that all my friends are doing. And it sucks, but it helps. The other side of that is the fun fact about what happened after I moved home was the first thing I did was I bought and built like a $1,700 computer. It's great, and it was good to invest in myself to give me something nice, especially knowing that for the next 10 years I was going to have to really cinch the belt a little bit and not spend a lot of money. So the two sides to understanding your means that I want to make sure you take home is one, it's going to be tough at times and you're going to have to make some sacrifices and cut some things out of your life that you might otherwise be able to do, but it will definitely be worth it in the long run. But on the other side of that, you also got to like love yourself a little. Like you got to treat yourself to things once in a while. So making sure that you're saving money for the things you really want, whether that's a trip or a friend gets married, you want to go to their wedding to be there for them, or you want to go to your fraternity convention every 2 years, something like that. You want to save that money up so you can do those fun things because you don't have to be miserable while paying back your debt. In fact, I can think back to high school. Some of my teachers who were probably, although I don't know, I didn't have a great perception of how old people were when I was in high school, but teachers that I assume were at least in their 30s are like, I finally paid back my debt. And I'm like, you can't tell me they've been miserable for 10, 15 years. Like there's obviously a way to pay it back that isn't the worst. So after spending all of my money on a computer, I got a job and started saving. And like I said earlier, I had like an $800 a month payment. That's a lot of money. Um, for the job that I got, for what it's worth, I didn't mention this. I graduated from Case with a bachelor's in psychology. And then I recently got my master's in nonprofit management. So what you might be thinking is, wow, you really don't want to make money ever. And you might be right. I don't know. If there's any psych degrees or psych majors here, bless your soul. And I wish you the best of luck with that. I know it's a great field to get into. It wasn't a great fit for me in terms of getting to a point where I was making money, but to leave without really a plan with that degree was not advisable. But I couldn't really get a good job. I found a job right away at Case, actually. And this goes back to taking advantage of freebies. If you think you want to go for a higher level degree, look for a job at a university. Like, really. I got my degree, my master's degree, in 2.5 years working there for $0 and 0 cents. I took no loans, I paid no money, and I got a master's degree out of it. And it wasn't a bad time. And I got paid while I was doing it. And I was able to pay off my debt. And while I was in school, my debt was frozen, or at least my subsidized debt was. So that's another big thing for taking advantage of freebies. You really want to look at what your options are, or find a job that is willing to help pay for a degree. Like if you need a certification or something like that, find something that bundles it together. They're out there. It's you hear about it, and I didn't think it would ever be a thing, but I found an opportunity like that, and it was great. Um, but the main thing that I've done over the last few years, and unfortunately, I couldn't make this work in a way that was readable on a PowerPoint. I made a spreadsheet. That's kind of my happy place. When in doubt, make a spreadsheet is how my brain works. It's a massive document, and in it, I've calculated interest rates and principal balances, and I've designed it to show the degradation of my loan, to see when it will pay off. If anyone's interested in getting like access to that document or the formulas or anything like that, just to get an idea, happy to provide that. I think my info will be at the end of the presentation. But it has helped a lot. Whenever I get stressed out about it, I pop into the spreadsheet, I throw some numbers in and see, like, oh, if I paid this right now, if I made this payment, how would that impact the trajectory of my loan? And that's how I know, like, recently I paid off one of my loans, and that was great. And then as a result, because I paid that off, it snowballed into the rest of my debt ending 6 months earlier because I paid off a chunk right now, because all of that interest doesn't exist. And I believe snowballing is one of the terms that you'll see on there in terms of how to approach debt payments. And I had actually heard about it for the first time while I was a consultant. One of the other LCs was talking about how he approached his debt, and basically it just means, from a very basic perspective in the way I've approached it, I have four payments to make. I pay, let's say I pay like one, two, three, $400, so it's $1,000 in total, and then I pay off the first loan that has, like, let's say, the worst interest rate, because that's how I've approached it, is paying off the thing that hurts the most in the long run. I then take, let's say, the $300 from that loan, and instead of having $300, I've just reallocated that $300 into another loan, effectively keeping my monthly payment consistently at, for me, it would be $800. And I've been doing that with the intent of like aggressively paying things down. And it goes back to the idea of under living in my means. I figure if suddenly I have $300 more in my pocket, I might not make as many prudent decisions about my finances. So I just buckle down and do it a little bit longer, and keep just assuming that that money's going towards a loan. Um, the other side, and I talked to Alex about this a little bit as we were preparing for this presentation. I call it the Jacob corollary to all of this. My good friend Jacob from high school graduated with over $100,000 of debt in college. I thought 60,000 was a lot, but he's literally got like double. I think his payment is between like 1,500 and 2,000 a month. His approach, and this is totally valid. If this is what works for you, then great. I think the biggest takeaway is going to be like, just pay your loans on time every month. That's at the very least the big takeaway from this, is how important that is. But his approach was, well, I would rather have fun in my 20s when I'm young and can do things, and then just like, you know, pay down my debt when I'm in my 30s or later. Granted, he has an IT job and makes like twice as much as I did, and will probably make six figures in the next decade. But um, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. A lot of people have a hard time paying their debt back even when they have that much money. It just depends on their own the way they track it. Financial tracking is one of the points I mentioned on here, but his method is very much the inverse of mine, where I was like, I'm just gonna be like really, I don't want to say poor. That's a misuse of that term. I just want to be very frugal in my 20s, and then by the time I'm 30, literally, I think it's right around the time I turn 30, I'll have no debt. And I can just have a life again. Like that's to see the light at the end of the tunnel is a really good motivator for me. Um, and I mentioned earlier the idea of that big spreadsheet that I have, to the point of financial tracking or finance trackers. Find at like Mint, if you've ever heard of that app, MINT, like where they make the money. Um, it's an app that, if you're not familiar, it's just a budgeting app, but I have a widget on my home screen on my phone that literally shows my net worth, which is very depressing to look at because of my debt, but it keeps me cognizant of what I owe. It keeps me honest. I see that and go, maybe I shouldn't buy a PlayStation right now. Maybe I should save that money and like make a payment on my loan or something like that. Um, but those things are great. They keep track of your credit score. They'll send you reminders for bill payments if you don't have that kind of ingrained already. If you don't enroll in auto payments, Bullet 2. I'm really just at this point trying to go bottom up, I guess. But um, the the finance tracking is great. And Mint's not the only app. I'm not fully aware of other alternatives. I admit I didn't do my homework for that, and I apologize. I'm sure you could use some Google foo and you'll find it pretty quick. They're common. As we saw earlier, debt is not an individual crisis; it is massive. Those sorts of companies are out there. Or if you just want to be old school, just make a spreadsheet, make a budget for yourself, track what you spend, track what you have coming in, and figure it out that way. You don't have to do anything fancy, but having a plan in place and a way to monitor that is so crucial. Whether your plan is I'm going to have fun now and pay later, or I'm going to pay now and then enjoy the rest of my life unencumbered, hopefully. Um, it's the most important thing is that you've got something in place. Um, and the aggressive payment point, like I said, I pay like 800 a month. I don't want to harp on that too much. I feel like I've repeated it 10 times already, but um, admittedly, I my private loans in particular, and what you'll see if you don't know what you have type wise for your loans, check. It's very important to know that private loans usually have like abysmally bad interest rates. Like they're very hurtful. Um, Unfortunately, my government loans, I think the highest one is around like 3.5%, which isn't too bad. My private loan was 9% interest, which is egregiously bad. That's very high. To the point that if I made a monthly payment minimum that they suggested, I literally would only pay off like $50 of my principal, which mind you, I think one was 12,000 and the other was about 8,000. I'd be paying $50 a month into that if I only paid the minimum. Um, so the aggressive payment model is, especially for those kinds of loans, pay more if you can. Really, pay more than the minimum if you can. Don't stress out about that. But for me, I pay about double the minimum payment on my private loans because, again, what you pay off now, you're not paying later with interest. And by paying, 200 instead of $80, I'm paying like 150 into the principal instead of 50. So it moves the needle pretty substantially, pretty quickly. I've paid aggressively the whole time. A lot of my friends have suggested consolidating my loans, and my response was, nope, I got a system. The system works. I've got my plan. I've got my spreadsheet. I'm going to pay these things right now. And again, I can't stress enough how lucky I am, says the person whose mom passed away at the start of this presentation. I can't stress how lucky I am having the opportunity to live at home, having a family with a stable living situation, having a partner who is supportive of me and all of my endeavors and who makes a little bit of money, which is nice, a lot more than I do, and can help support me when it comes to paying rent and living on our own. If it weren't for a horrible thing to happen and then a crazy string of luck, I wouldn't be able to do this. And that's why I mentioned like this won't work for everyone, and I recognize that. Um, but I can almost guarantee that there is something out there that works for you or that could work for you. Um, the world can be very unfair. Bad things can happen at a moment's notice, whether that's like someone hits your car and you have a huge car payment, or the tragic loss of life like a family member passes, or medical, you get sick and need to go and have a big medical bill. Things like that will happen, and as long as you have the plan in place, a way to track it, and goals in terms of like, I want to pay it off by the time I'm 30. I want to pay it off, X years early from what I'm supposed to do. As long as you have a goal in place, a way to track that, and just a general sense of a plan, um, I think you'll be good to go. It's tough. It'll be a challenge, but you can do it. If I can do it, a person with a bachelor's degree in psychology, if I can make insane payments back, like, and pay down half of my debt in 4 years, 5 years, I think just about anyone can do it as long as you have income, as long as you have a little bit of luck and a little bit of income, you can make a plan work. Um, at this point, I feel like I'm rambling on a little bit and soapboxing. Um, I think at the end we'll have time for questions if anybody wants to dive in, and my contact info will be there if you have any specific questions. Hopefully, some of what I said made sense to you and resonated. And again, for the 100th time, have a plan. I think that's the biggest takeaway. Have something in place, know what you're doing, and just be prepared to make those payments. And as long as you leave this conversation and go, I'm going to make sure I never miss a loan payment, you'll be golden. Between just general stability and prepping for your future with your credit score, you'll have an okay time of it. It is doable. I'm going to throw it back to Alex before I keep going and go off on a tangent, as I'm wont to do. So let me go ahead and pass on back, talk a little bit about resources and some final tips.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you again for sharing those great insights and advice and recommendations with all of us tonight. So as we start to wrap up, want to remind and plug a few different resources, right? So for those of you that are, if we've got alumni on the call, if you're graduating in a few weeks, for those of you that are still in undergraduate or looking at grad school, you don't have to wait until graduation to start thinking about your debts and how you manage them. Take advantage of the experts that are working on your campus right now. Your financial aid office is filled with people who are there to help you as a student and will do whatever they can to help prepare you for the future. So again, your campus offers a variety of different services within your financial aid office. So it's really important to check that out, reach out to them and have some conversations. They may have loan counseling courses, which is again, a great way to help you prepare for that process. Those courses can help you understand the types of loans you have, what your monthly payments might be looking like, and start to help you really understand the world that you'd be entering into. And another option is to look to bring a financial aid staff member to come and give a presentation to your chapter or colony. Hopefully that your organization is already bringing in and building those relationships for a variety of different offices, and one that often gets overlooked is the financial aid office. This can really be an opportunity to help prepare and provide a lot of great information to your members. It can be an investment in their future and your well-being, and it's also an opportunity to really build those relationships, because those relationships can be really helpful later on. You can leverage those connections across campus, and ultimately you can go from being just another face, just another student who comes in is trying to figure out their loan process, or what do I do, or how do I apply for financial aid, to being, oh, I know that person. I presented to that organization, last semester or whatever it is. So those relationships can really be used and leveraged to really some really strong ends in supporting your members. And I think that's something else that we often overlook in our organizations is the power of those relationships that exist that we can build for one another. Also, I'm going to throw a quick resource in the chat. You can go ahead and access this. It's just a little something we put together that folks can use to think about your process and what you're going to be looking to do in repaying your student loans. But we want to wrap up tonight with a few tips and tricks to keep in mind. So something that you've heard throughout the program, so I won't you know harp on it too much, but it starts with creating a budget. It can be really tough to plan to pay your student loans if you don't know where the rest of your money is going. So taking, as Kevin suggested, taking a few moments and setting up your budget is a sound way to not only manage your student loan payments, but your finances overall, whether that is a simple spreadsheet that you create yourself using apps like Mint or other ones that are out there. But take the time to understand your finances overall. Kevin, you want to tell us a little bit about the benefits of automatic payments? I know you touched on it earlier a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely did and didn't kind of follow down that path, but the quick explanation for why that's important, it's twofold. One, a lot of loan servicers will actually give you an interest break if you auto pay. I guess they like to know that the money's coming, so they say, "Thank you. Here's 0.5% or a full percent of interest off," which sounds like nothing, but is substantial over time. That's probably several $100s over the course of the loan. And the other thing, and I, for me personally, not manually paying takes so much stress out of the process. To not go, oh, here goes another $300, to just again like internalize that $300 is going to a loan. I don't have that $300, and for the process to be automated, it will make your life a lot less stressful as long as you're aware of what your bank account balance is. But there is like a little bit of a psychological component. I guess the degree paid off in the end. How about that?
Again, always continue to explore your options for financial aid, right? It continues throughout your lifetime. So if you haven't graduated yet, be sure to explore what is available, what are your options. So again, applying for scholarships, work study, make sure that you are reapplying each and every year, because whether it's life changes, whether that's funding that's available through the institution or other outside entities, again, don't leave free money on the table. It's what it's there for. I'll also throw in the chat. Don't forget about the scholarships available through Delta Chi, through the Delta Chi Educational Foundation. There are a number of scholarships available each and every year, both undergraduate and graduate scholarships. So be sure to check that out as well. Again, if there's free money out there, take it. It's to your benefit in the long term. Kevin, would you just want to touch again a little bit more? I know you talked about that aggressive payment, paying more when possible.
Yeah. As I kind of mentioned earlier, the big thing to remember is the minimum payment that the loan servicer gives you, between you and me, it's to make them the most money in the long term. It's not for your benefit in the long term. In the short term, sure. But as long as you're financially able to do so, I always recommend paying something over the minimum payment, just to help speed up the, for lack of a better term, the death of your loan. I mean, to speed up it being paid down. And some loan servicers actually, if you overpay, will just not require a payment from you. One of my private loans, it may only be private servicers. I've never gotten too far ahead on like the government loans, but my private loans, I'm so far paid up because I've paid double the minimum. I don't even owe them money. They're just like, you're good. Don't worry about it. So if you ever need that buffer, paying ahead will give you that buffer potentially. Obviously, look before you leap on that. But I can't stress enough, like playing with my spreadsheet, you can really see, if I change my monthly payment to this, like it pulls 3 months off my loans. Or if I change it to this, I can save myself, another like $50 a month, and it won't impact the overall length of repayment too much. So when possible, definitely try to pay something more. And at the very least, just make the minimum payment.
Great, thank you. And when we think about your repayments, it's okay to revisit those payments throughout the course of your lifetime and the life of the loan. Life changes. You may get a promotion. You may lose a job. There might be changes in your family life. So, regardless of what is happening, it's important for you to be able to revisit the structure and your approach to loan repayment to make sure that, again, at the end of the day, that you're continuing to make those payments, right? It is in your best interest, even if you have to go back and reevaluate your approach or what you're paying monthly, to make sure that you're putting yourself in a situation where you're able to make those payments month after month. So it is okay. This isn't a like, okay, I'm making this decision right now and this is what's got to be for the next decade. It's all right to go back and revisit, and it's really important that you do so. And again, we mentioned at the top, there's a lot of conversation about loan forgiveness. And again, who knows what's going to happen at a national level in the United States. But regardless of that side of things, there may still be ways that you are eligible to have portions of your student loans forgiven. This might be through a government program, depending on your career or the type of service that you provide. That also might be available through an employer. So it is important to take time to understand what those options are, because anytime that you can have a portion of your student loans forgiven, that can lead to really great financial benefits for you in the long term. So don't be afraid to explore what those may look like, depending on your career, your time frame, and the companies that you may be working with. So before we wrap up tonight, we've got one last poll that we're going to throw out there. Would encourage you to just look for, take a moment to share your thoughts. I'm more confident about my ability to successfully manage my student loans. Again, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of uncertainty and things that are out there. Hopefully we were able to provide some information for you tonight. So again, please, we'll leave this open for another, 10 seconds. So cast those votes. I am confident about my ability to successfully manage my loans. All right, a few more coming in. Well, I'm very pleased to see that folks are feeling that they are a little bit more confident, which is great. Again, it is not an easy process, but I hope that you walk away with some tips, some skills to successfully navigate this process. We're going to open it up for any questions from the group. Feel free, you can either unmute yourself, you can drop them in the chat. But if you've got any questions for myself or for Kevin, please go ahead and share them. While we wait, Kevin, we did get one in about what advice do you have for preparing our members for financial success? Any thoughts on how you would, advice that we could share with members about how do we have this conversation as brothers and in our chapters and colonies?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you brought up earlier with bringing in like financial aid reps from your university is a great option. They, in theory, should have answers to any questions you have, especially if it pertains to your university. But when you think about it, I mean, a big part of being active in your chapter, being, a brother in good standing, is paying your dues. Maybe you make that money at a job and you pay it. Maybe your parents help you out. Maybe you pay some other way. But at the end of the day, even like that basic expectation of being a part of Delta Chi involves having that budget in place or having a plan in place to make that payment. And I think the idea of, you know, financial well-being in the future it's honestly just respecting yourself and kind of promoting your own positive mental health and honestly maybe physical health if it really stresses to that point. But I think just having that conversation with the professionals on campus and framing it in the context of, let's do a budgeting exercise for how we're going to pay off our dues for the next year, something like that, making it kind of relevant to the chapter. And then maybe finding a way to expand it out into something bigger, or have a workshop, have someone in your chapter or a professional on campus host a budget building workshop and practice, you know, either with your real money or with fake money, set a goal and budget something out. I think there's a lot of fun ways to learn how to do that. It's pretty accessible, and it's when it comes to something that we all love, money. I think a lot of people are going to be willing to learn to be able to maximize what they have in the long run.
Great, thank you. The one thing that I would add to all that, I think Kevin really nailed it, is transparency, right? I think that's something that all of our organizations can struggle with at times of like, again, from a chapter colony level, right? Like where does our money go? What does our budget look like? But also it's being real about what is the cost of membership. That is a really important thing, not only for your associate members, but for all of your members to understand. You may have members right now that are paying for their dues by taking out additional student loans. And what does that mean in the long run? Right. So having conversations about what is the culture of our finances, how are we supporting one another, how are we making sound fiscal decisions, but also creating a space for people to have those conversations. Because again, everyone's coming to the table with different experiences, different, financial situations, a whole host of different pieces, right? And so knowing that there are those differing pieces in our organizations, our members have different backgrounds and approaches and lived experiences, that can be really daunting. And so figuring out how do we do this in a way that make people comfortable in the conversation and recognize that what's easy for one is not easy for another, right? As Kevin said, there's a lot of different ways that people are going to tackle the student loans. It doesn't mean that there is a direct right or wrong way, but how do we find ways that make sense for our members to be financially successful throughout their collegiate experience as well as throughout their life? Well, I'm gonna again, if there's any last questions, please feel free to throw them out there. Our information is on the screen. Feel free to reach out if you have any thoughts, questions, or concerns. Um, Again, want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us this evening and being a part of the conversation. We hope you were able to get some really useful information. Again, we're happy to help however we can. And I want to give a huge thank you to Kevin for taking his time in the preparation of this program and for being here this evening and sharing his experiences with all of us. Truly grateful when an alumnus is able to and willing to share that with all of our members. So thank you, Kevin, for being here. Any final thoughts or words that you want to impart our members before we wrap up tonight?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here. Happy to talk. I love talking. Um, I guess, the final thing, and I said it a few times, but if the only thing you walked away with was don't miss a payment, then we succeeded. That's I can't explain how crucially important it is to just make sure you make a payment on time. Um, and like I said, things are going to seem daunting. Life might throw you curveballs, but as long as you have a plan, some plan, even if that plan changes, you'll be able to overcome it. And it your debt doesn't have to define who you are. Um, it will certainly shape who you are, but it doesn't have to be the be all end all of who you are and what you do. And um, yeah, that's pretty much all I got. I kind of said my piece earlier. Do feel free to shoot me an email. Um, I'm I'm around. I'm available to chat. Um, I can even chat on the phone, or maybe someday have a working camera and can do a Zoom call or something with you if you want to go over, if you want to take a look at my spreadsheet or get those formulas to kind of get an idea for what it looks like for you. Um, I'm available all the time um, into the future. My email's out there, so feel free to use it.
Great. Well, again, thank you to Kevin and thank you to each and every one of you for taking the time to join us this evening. We hope you have a great rest of your evening, that the rest of your semesters and quarters wrap up smoothly, and that you have great success moving not only into repaying your student loans, but all of your future endeavors. Thanks for being a part of our programming, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.